My fiancée made me sign a prenup. Then I saw what she was hiding. I never thought the woman I loved would hand me a prenup 3 weeks before our wedding, but that's exactly what happened on a cold Tuesday evening in October. Sarah walked into our apartment with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Richard, who carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car, and she didn't even look me in the eye when she slid the documents across our kitchen table. My hands were shaking as I picked up the papers, not because I was angry about the prenup itself, but because of the way she was acting. Like I was a stranger, like the past 4 years we'd spent building a life together meant absolutely nothing. I looked at her face, searching for the warmth I'd fallen in love with, but all I saw was cold calculation, and that's when I knew something was terribly wrong. The Richard guy just stood there with his arms crossed, watching me like I was some kind of threat, and I realized this wasn't just about protecting assets, this was about something much darker. Here's the thing about prenups that most people don't understand. They're not inherently bad, and honestly, I wasn't even opposed to signing one if it made Sarah feel more secure about our future together. But the way this was happening felt like an ambush, a calculated attack designed to catch me off guard and make me feel small. Sarah had never mentioned wanting a prenup during any of our conversations about marriage, not when I proposed on that beach in California, not when we were picking out venues, not even when we were addressing wedding invitations at 2 in the morning. She had plenty of opportunities to bring it up, but instead she waited until we were basically at the finish line, until most of the deposits were paid and our families had booked their flights. I sat there staring at the documents, feeling my stomach turn into knots, wondering what could have possibly changed in the last few weeks to make her think this was necessary. The prenup itself was absolutely insane, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it read more like a punishment than a protection of assets. According to the document, if we ever divorced, I would leave the marriage with essentially nothing. No claim to our home, no claim to any joint accounts, no claim to anything we built together during our marriage. It got even worse. There were clauses about infidelity that only applied to me, restrictions on where I could live after a divorce, and even a section that limited my ability to talk about our relationship publicly. I'm not a lawyer, but even I could tell this thing was one-sided to an extreme degree, designed to give Sarah complete control while leaving me powerless. The part that really got me was a clause near the end that stated if she wanted a divorce for any reason, I would have to pay her $50,000 as a separation fee, which made absolutely no sense since she came from money and I was still paying off student loans. I looked up at Sarah after reading through the first 10 pages, and I asked her directly why she felt this was necessary, why she couldn't have talked to me about this months ago like a normal person. She finally met my eyes, and what she said next made my blood run cold. She told me her father insisted on it, that her family wouldn't support our marriage unless I signed, that this was non-negotiable. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script someone else had written for her. I'd met her father exactly 3 times, and each time he'd treated me like I was dirt on his expensive Italian shoes, making comments about my modest career as a high school teacher and asking when I planned to do something more substantial with my life. Now it all made sense. This prenup wasn't about protecting Sarah, it was about her father maintaining control, making sure I knew my place in their wealthy family's hierarchy. But here's where things get interesting, and this is the part that changed everything. I told them I needed time to review the document with my own lawyer before signing anything. Richard, the attorney, immediately got defensive and said there wasn't time for that, that we needed to move quickly to get this finalized before the wedding. That's when I knew for certain something was wrong, because any legitimate lawyer would encourage someone to seek independent legal counsel before signing a prenup. That's literally the standard advice in these situations. Sarah's face went pale when I insisted on having my own lawyer review it, and she started talking really fast, saying things like, "Don't you trust me?" and "If you loved me, you'd just sign it," and "My family will think I'm only marrying you for money." I stood my ground though, and I told them both that I wouldn't sign anything without proper legal representation, and if that was a problem, then maybe we needed to postpone the wedding. The next morning, I called my college roommate Derek, who had become a family law attorney in Boston, and I sent him a copy of the prenup to review. He called me back 3 hours later, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Dude, what the hell did you get yourself into?" Derek spent 45 minutes walking me through every problematic clause, every red flag, every section that would never hold up in court because it was so obviously designed to financially abuse me. He told me that prenups like this sometimes get drafted when one party is hiding something significant, when they're planning something shady, or when they want an easy exit strategy that leaves them with everything. The more he talked, the more my mind started racing, connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see before. Sarah's secretive phone calls, her new work trips that started 6 months ago, the way she'd changed the password on her laptop and started closing it whenever I walked into the room. I decided to do something I'm not proud of, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I waited until Sarah went to work the next day, and I went through her laptop using an old password she'd used for everything before she suddenly changed it. My hands were shaking as I typed, half expecting it not to work, but it did. She'd only changed her main password, not her backup recovery questions, which I obviously knew the answers to. What I found in her email inbox made me physically sick to my stomach, and I had to sit down on our bedroom floor because my legs literally gave out from under me. There were dozens of emails between Sarah and someone named Marcus, and these weren't professional emails or friendly catch-up messages. These were intimate, detailed, explicit conversations between two people having a full-blown affair. The emails went back almost 8 months, starting right around the time Sarah had gotten that promotion at work that she'd been so excited about. Marcus was apparently a senior partner at her firm, married with 2 kids, and from what I could piece together, they'd been sleeping together during her business trips to the Seattle office. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was the content of their most recent conversations, where they discussed their future together. Sarah had written to Marcus explaining that she was going ahead with the marriage to me because her father threatened to cut her off financially and remove her from his will if she didn't. She literally wrote, "I'll marry him to keep my inheritance secure, make him sign an ironclad prenup, then divorce him in a year or 2 once my father's health situation resolves itself." I sat there on our bedroom floor, reading email after email, watching the entire foundation of my relationship crumble into dust around me. There were messages where Sarah laughed about the prenup, where she and Marcus joked about how naive I was, where they planned their real future together once she'd secured her family's money. One email from Marcus suggested she make the prenup extra harsh so I'd refuse to sign it, giving her an easy out. But Sarah responded that she thought I was desperate enough and in love enough to sign anything. They had contingency plans, backup strategies, timelines for when she'd file for divorce. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated scheme to use me as a placeholder while she secured her financial future. I printed out every single email, every text message I could access, every shred of evidence of their affair and their plan. Then I called Derek back and told him everything, and he told me to sit tight and not confront Sarah yet, that we needed to be strategic about this. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal, had to sit across from Sarah at dinner and listen to her talk about wedding centerpieces and honeymoon plans, all while knowing she was planning to betray me in the most devastating way possible. She kept asking if I'd scheduled a meeting with a lawyer about the prenup, kept pressuring me to just sign it, kept making me feel guilty for holding up the process. Finally, I told Sarah I'd reviewed the prenup with an attorney and I was ready to sign it, but I wanted to do it at a proper meeting with both our lawyers present. She seemed relieved, almost giddy, and she immediately set up a meeting for the following Tuesday at Richard's office downtown. I showed up to that meeting with Derek and a folder full of printed emails, and the look on Sarah's face when she saw Derek was priceless. She knew something was wrong. Richard started the meeting with his usual pompous speech about protecting assets and ensuring a stable future, and I let him go on for about 5 minutes before I interrupted him. I slid the folder of printed emails across the conference table, and I watched Sarah's face go from confused to horrified in about 3 seconds flat. "Before I sign anything," I said, keeping my voice steady even though I was shaking inside, "I think we should discuss why Sarah needs such an aggressive prenup, especially considering she's been planning to divorce me all along." The room went completely silent, and Richard picked up the folder and started reading, his professional composure cracking with each page. Sarah tried to grab the documents, tried to say something about privacy and illegal access, but Derek shut her down immediately by pointing out that I lived in the apartment, and the computer wasn't password protected when I accessed it, technically not illegal in our state. "You went through my private emails?" Sarah finally managed to say, and the audacity of her being offended was almost funny given the circumstances. I looked at her, this woman I'd planned to spend my life with, and I didn't even recognize her anymore. "You've been sleeping with your boss for 8 months, planning to use me to secure your inheritance and joking about how stupid I am with your affair partner," I said, my voice getting louder with each word. "The prenup, the sudden wedding timeline, all of it was just part of your scheme, and you're upset about privacy?" Richard looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor, and he started gathering his papers, mumbling something about ethical conflicts and needing to withdraw as her counsel. Sarah tried to salvage the situation, tried to claim the emails were taken out of context, that Marcus was just a friend and they were joking around, that she really did love me. But I'd read hundreds of their messages. There was no other context that could explain the detailed plans they'd made, the explicit content they'd shared, the calculated timeline they'd developed for her to secure her inheritance and then leave me. Derek handed Richard a document he'd prepared outlining my conditions. The wedding was off. Sarah would pay for all cancellation fees since the wedding was her idea and her timeline, and I would be moving out of our apartment immediately with all my belongings, and she would not contact me again. The next part is where things got even more interesting, because Sarah's father somehow found out about the situation within 24 hours. He called me directly, which was shocking since he'd barely said 10 words to me during our entire relationship, and he offered me money to keep quiet about what happened. He offered me $50,000, the exact amount Sarah's prenup would have made me pay her if she divorced me, to sign an NDA and not tell anyone in their social circle about Sarah's affair or the prenup scheme. I actually laughed out loud at the irony, this man offering me hush money with the same dollar amount his daughter was going to extract from me in her fake marriage plan. I told Sarah's father exactly where he could stick his money and his NDA, and I told him I planned to tell anyone who asked exactly why the wedding was canceled. He threatened me, said he'd ruin my career, said I'd never work in education again if I damaged his daughter's reputation. But here's the thing about being a high school teacher with student loans and a 10-year-old car. You don't have much to lose, and rich people's threats don't mean much when you've never had money or status to begin with. I told him to do his worst, and then I blocked his number, along with Sarah's and anyone else associated with their family. The fallout was spectacular in ways I never could have anticipated, because apparently Sarah's affair with Marcus wasn't as secret as they thought it was. Once the wedding was canceled and I stopped pretending everything was fine, other people started coming forward with information about the affair. Co-workers who'd seen them together, hotel staff who recognized them, even Marcus's wife who'd suspected something for months but didn't have proof. Marcus got fired from the firm for violating ethics policies about relationships with subordinates, and Sarah got quietly shuffled to a different department where she couldn't work directly with senior partners anymore. But the absolute best part of this entire nightmare came about 6 weeks after I'd called off the wedding, when I got a call from Sarah's younger sister, Emma. Emma and I had always gotten along really well, and she'd been genuinely upset when the wedding was canceled because Sarah had told her family that I'd cheated, and that's why things fell apart. Emma called me crying, apologizing for believing Sarah's lies, explaining that she'd just found out the truth from a family friend who knew Marcus's wife. She told me that their father had essentially disowned Sarah after learning the full extent of her scheme, not because he cared about me or morality, but because Sarah's actions had embarrassed the family and damaged their reputation in their social circles. Emma told me that Sarah's inheritance was now in jeopardy, that their father had revised his will and Sarah was no longer the primary beneficiary, that the entire plan she'd constructed had backfired spectacularly. The promotion she'd gotten at work, the one that started this whole affair, was being reconsidered because the firm realized it had only happened because of her inappropriate relationship with Marcus. Everything Sarah had schemed and manipulated and lied for was falling apart, and while I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, I won't lie and say there wasn't a sense of justice in watching her reap what she'd sown. I'm sitting here now, almost 6 months after that terrible Tuesday when Sarah handed me the prenup, and I'm honestly grateful everything happened the way it did. Yeah, it was humiliating to cancel a wedding, to have to tell friends and family that the person I loved had been using me, to move back in with my parents at 32 years old while I got my life back together. But imagine if I'd signed that prenup, if I'd gone through with the wedding, if I'd spent a year or two married to someone who was actively planning my financial and emotional destruction. Imagine the damage she could have done with more time, more access, more control over my life and finances. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is actually the best thing in disguise, even if you can't see it at the time. When Sarah handed me that prenup, I thought my world was ending, but really, she was handing me the key to escape a relationship that would have destroyed me. Her greed and her arrogance made her overconfident. She thought the prenup was bulletproof, thought I was too in love or too naive to question it, thought she could manipulate me into signing away my future. But by making the prenup so aggressively one-sided, by pushing so hard and refusing to let me get legal counsel, she actually raised all the red flags that made me investigate further. Looking back, there were signs I'd missed or ignored because I was so in love with the idea of who I thought Sarah was. The way she'd sometimes make cutting remarks about my salary, the way she'd compare me to her friends' wealthy husbands, the way she'd get annoyed when I wanted to have serious conversations about our future finances. I'd brushed it all off as stress or her being tired from work, but really, those were glimpses of who she truly was underneath the charming exterior. Love really can make you blind to things that should be obvious, and sometimes you need a shock to the system to see clearly again. These days, I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually, because I'm building a life that's authentic and based on real values instead of money and status. I'm still teaching, still driving my old car, still living simply, but I'm happy in a way I never was with Sarah, even when I thought things were good. I've started dating again, casually, and I'm amazed at how different it feels to be with people who value me for who I am, rather than seeing me as a pawn in some larger scheme. The trust issues are real, I won't pretend they're not, but I'm working through them with a therapist who's helping me understand that what happened with Sarah says everything about her and nothing about my worth as a person. So if you're listening to this and you're in a relationship where something feels off, where you're being pressured to sign documents you don't understand, where your partner seems to be hiding things or acting secretive, please trust your instincts. Don't ignore red flags because you're in love, or because you're afraid of rocking the boat, or because you think things will get better. And if someone hands you a prenup or any legal document and tells you there's no time for you to get your own lawyer to review it, that right there is your sign that something is very, very wrong. Legitimate agreements aren't made under pressure and threats. The prenup Sarah gave me was supposed to protect her assets and ensure she could leave the marriage with everything intact. And in a weird way, it did exactly that. Just not in the way she planned, because she left our relationship with her reputation destroyed, her inheritance in jeopardy, her career damaged, and her affair exposed to everyone who mattered in her life. Meanwhile, I left with nothing except my dignity, my integrity, and the knowledge that I'd dodged the biggest bullet of my life. And honestly, I'll take that trade any day of the week.